Good evening, everyone. We will be getting started for our first LionSide Chat in approximately 3 minutes. But in the meantime, if you want to go ahead and make sure that you can hear us and notice that please that the chat has been disabled. I will be facilitating Q&A and I'll explain that momentarily. Also, we do have the raise hand feature, but for this chat, we do ask that you wait until the end when we invite questions to ask any questions. Please be patient with us as we're going to get started in roughly 3 minutes. Thank you. For those of you that are just joining us, we will be getting started with our first LionSide Chat in roughly 2 minutes. We ask that you take a moment, make sure you can hear us and are able to receive our sound. We will be starting in approximately 1 minute now. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first LionSide Chat at Penn State Berks. We are excited to see a number of you joining us tonight for our inaugural event. My name is Dawn Pfeiffer-Reitz, and I am an assistant teaching professor at Penn State Berks, and I'm also the CAS 100 coordinator, and I am part of a group of 3 folks from Penn State Berks, including Ryan Hassler and Sonia De La Cueto. And the 3 of us have put together a really unique experience where we have invited many folks from our community, Penn State Berks community, into your homes starting tonight, and we look forward to this experience. So this is our inaugural event, and we have some pieces of information that we want to share with you. We will be facilitating a Q&A at the end, approximately 30 or 35 minutes into our session. So you may go ahead and post your questions into the chat. Into the Q&A feature as we move through. At the end of our event, you'll be asked to complete a post-chat survey, and we really do recommend that you do that because your feedback will be really vital for us. So let me just make sure I have all of my notes taken here. So this is our first session, and we appreciate your patience as we navigate any unanticipated technology glitches or issues. So come on in and welcome to our campus. We are so glad that you could join us today. Before we get started, we wanted to share with you that you should feel free to submit your questions throughout the program via the Q&A feature. Once the presentation concludes, I will facilitate a discussion with our presenter. We will also be recording today's session, so you can revisit this topic or even share this experiences with your friends or family. So now we are excited to introduce our first presenter, Dr. Lorena Tribe, and she will be speaking on a very unique topic, the material science of masks. Whoops. So, Lorena, I invite you to share your video if you wish, or you may keep it muted as we get started. But Dr. Lorena Tribe is a professor of chemistry with us at Penn State Berks, where she has worked since 2002. And you can see that she has a plethora of experiences with all of these things that will make our conversation today about the material science of masks very enriching. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our LionSide Chat. I'm going to invite Lorena to now share her screen. Dr. Tribe, we are so glad that you came out to be our first victim tonight, or our first person to present the LionSide Chat. And you can go ahead and get started whenever you're ready, and I will let you know if there are any issues or anything that we need to manage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and your team for organizing this lovely event. I feel so honored to be the first one kicking it off, and so very grateful for all of you that have decided to take some time this evening and to tune into this LionSide Chat. We live indeed in complex and historical times for several reasons, so I'm touched that you are choosing to spend them with us. So without more ado, I would like to tell you a little bit about masks and how I got there. I thought I'd start with a joke that was posted on my former colleague Marnie Dresser's Facebook. I have referenced everything throughout this talk except where this joke originally came from. Some of you have probably seen it before. But anyway, this is the relative importance in 2020 so far. So we have January, February, March, April going by, and the things you know that are a constant. Coffee is always important. Our cars have declined. Sweatpants have really gone up, and here come masks, right? So January, February, nobody was thinking about masks. Then we started talking about them. Then they went away. Then they became important, and then it's this mess. So I don't like controversial topics. But I do like science. So I thought masks were ineffective for viruses. So I wasn't really paying attention. I was like with all the other people in January and February, flatlining on masks don't have anything to do with me. And then a couple of things happened, several things happened in quick succession. So my friend Stefania, whose family lives in Italy, ordered a packet of masks online. And I was like, wow, okay. And then my colleague and friend Greglin, who works at Penn State Berks, suddenly posted on March 22nd this beautiful picture. If you follow my mouse, it's the one in the up-hand corner of masks that she and her family were making to donate. And then my friend, Dr. Riddle, who's a well-known physician in this area, also posted this other lovely picture of homemade masks on her Facebook, which were also to be donated. And you must be thinking, Lorena spends a lot of time on Facebook, and that's probably true, especially during the quarantine. But I was thinking, why is it that my science-oriented friends are providing masks to people when we know that masks don't really work for viruses? So I started thinking about it. And it actually reminded me of something that happened when I was a little girl. And this must have been when I was like 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. And we were at home at dinner, and my mom was complaining about some food that had spoiled because it was in a plastic bag. And it might have been apples or it might have been bread. And my dad said, that's because they're using plastic instead of cellophane. Because, you know, cellophane breathes, whereas plastic does not. And full of my 8-year-old wisdom, I said, no, Daddy, cellophane doesn't breathe. It doesn't have any holes for the air to go through. And my dad didn't really like being interrupted too much, but he took a deep breath and said, Lorena, just because you don't see the holes doesn't mean they're not there. And that was like a wow moment, you know, to suddenly realize that there are things out there beyond our own experience, beyond what is common sense to us, things that, you know, that make a lot of sense, that reality could be different in some ways. There can be something else going on that we don't really see. I sometimes wonder if that comment of my dad is what allowed me to then study, you know, quantum chemistry, where what you finally believe is real is very counterintuitive to what one can see. But anyway, that's another story. So to go on with the plastic and the cellophane, Some of you probably know, the ones that are on the older side like me, what cellophane is. It's actually a material made out of polymers, of glucose. And here I have some representations of glucose because I am a chemist, so if I can put in a formula somewhere, I will do that. So here we have glucose written with its symbols, and where's my mouse? Here's my mouse. So on the left-hand side, we have this 6-carbon structure with all the hydrogens and oxygens that go there. Or for those of you that might have been in a chemistry lab at some point, we have balls and sticks, another representation. Or my favorite over here on the right, puffy glucose, where we see all the space occupied by the atoms like it kind of would be in nature. And I would like to mention that these models are made with a program called Spartan that was made available thanks to Chancellor Hilkirk and the Helen and William Heinz Endowment for Engineering and Science Equipment. It is thanks to this endowment that all the students at Penn State Berks can use this very fancy software. So that's my commercial break. I will keep going. So if you take all these glucose molecules and bind them together in long, long chains, you end up with the core of cellophane. Also, you know, depending on how you arrange them, you can get cellulose, which is the main thing in cotton and paper, and we're going to come back to this, and that's why I'm introducing it now. But this is the basis of cellophane, which is that lovely transparent wrap through which humidity can actually migrate a little bit. On the other hand, you can have PVC. So here we have our carbons and hydrogens and this chlorine that gets in there. And these form long chains that are very flat and can nest close to each other. You can kind of imagine it like a handful of dry spaghetti all lined up when it's still in the box. And then no humidity goes through that because it's a nice, you know, compact structure. So, and that's what was originally used for plastic bags, although now we use other things also. So, so that was the story about, you know, different ways that materials interact with films or barriers or wrappings. So going back to what this has to do with masks, during January and February, if I thought about a mask at all, what I saw on the news or what I was thinking about were the N95 respirators. And this is the kind of protective device that health providers use. They have specifications. Here I have some details. You can find this on the FDA. There are actually links to everything that I show either on the slides or at the end. So if you're curious about some of this, you know, then you can go and follow up on it. But these are really important. It's really important that they seal well around the nose and the mouth, and they're made of a special material. And these are good, you know, for environments in which a physician would need them. On the other hand, these pretty masks that my friends were making and making available are cloth masks. And now you can find this also on the FDA website. These are cloth face coverings. That's how they describe them. They don't protect the worker wearing them from exposure. That's what the FDA said back when they made this website. Cloth face coverings are only intended to help contain the wearer's respiratory droplets from being spread. Okay, what are the characteristics of these cloth face coverings? They have to be useful. They have to cover both the nose and the chin. So as shown here, a nice snug fit. They have to adapt well to the face. You can't have something baggy that's hanging around. It has to be, you know, well close into the face. You can secure it either with something that goes around the ear, so a loop, or with ties. And you need to have several, at least 2 or several layers of cloth. You have to be able to breathe in and out through it. and you have to be able to both wash and dry it. Okay, that's how an effective cloth mask works to contain the wearer's respiratory droplets from being spread. So that's what you can find on the FDA's website. Now, shortly after these things started to happen, the American Chemical Society, of which I am a member, hosted a talk. So kind of like today's talk, but for chemists, where a researcher from the University of Chicago presented his research on the fabrics used in cloth masks. So I listened to it, and I was very intrigued. And what I want to do in the rest of this talk is kind of go back and figure out, you know, the physics, the mechanics of what's going on with those fabrics so that I can show you the results that were obtained and, you know, provide a little more to this discussion of what these cloth masks are effective for. I would say that as is common in science, you know, there's rarely a last answer. People provide information, other people go out and discuss it, and, you know, that's how we build a body of knowledge. So staying away from absolutes here. Okay, so what is fabric, or how is fabric made? Here we have a loom, okay? And in a loom, you have threads. They call them warp threads, which are coming down here. And then you have a shuttle, which is a little thing that goes back and forth, and that carries the weft thread. And the warp threads kind of go up and down and interlace, and then the other thread goes back and forth through them, and that's the way the fabric gets made. I actually had the opportunity of seeing this when also I was a kid, because that was my father's business. He actually made these shuttles. So more than once I ended up tagging along behind him when he went to visit a customer and drop off some shuttles. I got to see how these industrial looms were working. Most recently, people have moved away from these wooden shuttles and now they use air propulsion. But the idea is the same. Actually, it's the same idea of what kids do when you want to give them an interesting craft to make. And here you see also the threads going vertically and then the horizontal ones weaving in and out, alternating, making the fabric. So when we think of a mask, you know, this is what we're thinking about. It's a fabric and it'll be made this way. So if you want to get up close, the best thing you can do to see a fabric is a micrograph. And these are pictures taken very, very close up. You can see here the scale is 500 microns or micrometers. So a micrometer is 10 to the minus 6 meters. So this is on the scale of the hundreds of microns. And this is a close-up on the scale here. This little piece is 5 microns. So this is a cotton-based fabric. It has some additives, but it's a cotton-based fabric. And I was interested in it because I was wondering, when the virus comes along, you know, how does it get through the mask? If the masks are not good, how does it get through the mask? So it's not a Pac-Man, right? It's not gonna come and eat up the fabric. It's going to find a way through the openings. So I wanted to understand how big the openings were. And here we have, you know, some examples. So how is this made? I talked earlier about glucose and how these glucose molecules can link together and that'll be the basis of cotton. So if I took these molecules and put them in a long line, the width, actually not the length could be very long, but the width is just under 1 nanometer, right? It's very, very tiny for one glucose. So you can imagine that you have a lot of these formations of these kind of snakes of glucose all bundled together to form something like we're seeing on the right-hand side of the slide, which is one of these little threads of cotton, okay? Actually, the thread here is like 5 microns across, and this is 1 nanometer. So you're going to need a lot of these, about 5,000 of them. Okay, so that's what cotton looks like when you get up close. Another fabric that people consider when they're talking about masks is silk. So I have found out recently, because I did not know anything about silk, that silk is made up of 2 coils of fibrin that are held together by sericin coatings. And once again, there's information one can go and look up on that. That's also in Wikipedia. So that I could actually model also with that nice program Spartan, just to take another look at it. It turns out that this fibrin that they mention is just a group of amino acids. So those of you that have taken a biochem, maybe a biology class, are accustomed to seeing amino acids written this way: glycine, serine, glycine, alanine, and so on and so forth. So it's a long polymer which has this sequence of amino acids repeating, right? So I drew a few of them, and they look like this long rope over here of amino acids. If you turn it around and look at it from the end forward, it looks more like the graph at the top here. And I thought that was super cool, so I put the image in. When you actually have a thread of silk or a strand of silk, it has 2 of these tubes, right? So like one of these and then another one right beside it. And they're kind of bound together by the other component, which is the sericin. I didn't model the sericin. The sericin has 18 amino acids, of which serine is one of the more important ones. But just to give you an idea then of what a piece of silk is made out of, it's made out of these long tubes, 2 of them stuck together side by side, and then this other also very rich group of amino acids, kind of sticky, holding it all together. So a lot of hydrogen bonds, a lot of distribution of charge, negative and positive areas. So that's silk. Here we have a micrograph of silk. And you can see that throughout this, I mentioned before, I have references. Some of them are to scientific journals. For other of these images, I found them on websites of different companies. I'm not endorsing the companies, I'm just using their pretty pictures. But in this case, if you look closely, once again, you have the silk strands, right? So a lot of those strands that I just had together would form one of these kind of thin strips. And then you get a bunch of the thin strips all running together. And then once again, you weave them together, you put them in a loom, you make the fabric, and you have this crisscross look to it. In this micrograph, about an inch is 200 microns, or about an inch, depends on the size of the screen you're looking at this on. But this is about 200 microns across here. Once again, just to get an idea of what this looks like. So what I did was put both these images side by side. Once again, you know, I have too many things on my screen and I'm having a hard time seeing what I want to see. But you have the scales down there in the corners. If you look at the scale closely and you kind of extrapolate, I highlighted the holes that you can see in the fabric, right? So these would be like the open areas that something could go through. I think we could agree that the holes could be up to about 100 microns in diameter. Just a back of the envelope estimation based on the scales that you can see there and the apparent size of all these holes. So about 100 microns. Now, what's trying to get through the holes, right? It's the virus. So I found this nice graphic that tells us something about the sizes of particles, okay? So if we're talking about pollens, 10 to 100 microns. If we're talking about fungal spores, about 1 to 100 microns. I didn't know that a fungus was so big. Bacteria, they're a little bit smaller, they go up to 10. And down here we have the viruses. So viruses don't make it to a micron, right? Viruses are really tiny. There's going to be a great talk about viruses next week on our next LionSide Chat. So I'm looking forward to that one. I suddenly want to know a lot more about viruses than I ever did before. So, but anyway, apparently viruses are in this range. So somewhere between 0.02 and 0.03 microns. To which you might say, it looks worse than trying to catch a tiny gnat with a fly swatter. That was my daughter's analogy when I was telling her the size of the virus and the size of the holes in the mask. So for a moment there, it looks a bit futile, right? So I'd like to circle back to the paper that this gentleman was talking about a couple of weeks ago and see what actually what results their groups have. This is out of the University of Chicago and also out of Argonne National Laboratory, where they have fantastic equipment to do material science research. And this slide is way too busy, so I just want to pull out a couple of highlights here. It was color-coded, so I tried to follow the same color code. So we have what they call cotton silk. That means 1 layer of a 600 thread per inch cotton and 2 layers of silk. So those are the green results, and I'm going to go to another slide to look at them more carefully. Then in blue, they had cotton chiffon. That's 1 layer of 600 cotton and 2 layers of chiffon. And finally, in the pinkish purplish color, they have 1 layer of 600 cotton and 1 layer of flannel. That's their cotton flannel. So I just put this in so that you know when we go to the other slide now, and I've kind of blown it up a little bit, so that we know what they're talking about. What they did was prepare these swatches of cloth, of fabric, and they send in an aerosol from one side. They have very sophisticated equipment to produce aerosol, which are those tiny little droplets that stay floating around in the atmosphere after you talk to somebody, or after you sing, or after you sneeze, or whatever. So they make these aerosols. This experiment was done with sodium chloride dissolved in water, so not the virus, but the droplet sizes are the ones we're interested in. And then they have a detector on the other side. And as you can see by the previous slide, I'm going back here, the range of sizes is huge. We're going all the way from 10 to 10,000 nanometers, okay? So a big range there in their equipment. Okay, so back here. So what could they see? First of all, the red, which is also a circle. So the circle is the N95 respirator. So this is the good one. This is the one that physicians use. And what they're plotting is filtration efficiency versus the size of the droplet. And if everything were filtrated, that is, if the mask retains everything, the filtration efficiency would be 1, and that's what we would really want. If the mask were not there, filtration efficiency would be 0, and the band would be all the way down here at the bottom, okay? So the N95 at very small sizes is about 65% effective. It gets a lot better when this grows a little. It has a weakish area in the middle here, and that's not because the respirator is bad, that's because of the physics of the problem. And then it becomes very, very efficient once again for the larger particles over here. So this is what physicians get to wear, right? Then we have in green the cotton silk combination. And that's what what they were describing on the other page, what I was highlighting on the other page. So a 600 thread per inch cotton and 2 layers of silk. And if you look at it, just about everywhere across this range, it's better than the N95, right? Let's stay away from better or worse. It absorbs more or it retains more of these particles than even an N95 would. What about the other ones? Cotton with chiffon, that's the blue, which is also the triangle. That's pretty high up also, right? And last but not least, the cotton flannel, and that's also very high, except at the end here, for the somewhat larger particles, it's not great. So these layers of fabric are actually doing a very decent job of keeping the droplets from going through. The second part of the graph, which I had separated out for clarity, I'll bring that one up now. Here it's actually showing, first of all, the surgical masks, and now we're comparing what happens if there is a gap and if there isn't a gap. Because part of the problem that people discuss is what happens if the mask doesn't really fit your face, right? So what happens if it's loose over the nose or if it's bulgy here on the cheeks or something like that? So they actually did the experiment by cutting a little hole in the mask. And they say, okay, if this mask has a bit of a hole somewhere, then how does this change things? So if you take a surgical mask, here we have it again. It's the red circles. It's doing better, then worse at this place. There's a certain size of particle that's really difficult to trap because it's small enough to go through, but it doesn't have the motion of the really tiny particles. There's some area there where it's hard to trap particles. If it had a gap, also in red, but squares, then it's not so good, right? You're going from 65, 70%, all the way down to 50%. So even if you have the best equipment, if it doesn't close properly, it's not fantastic. And then that compared to the cotton silk combination again, which we had seen before, is fantastic if it doesn't have a gap. And yes, if it doesn't fit well, then it's not good, right? You can go all the way down to like 20% here almost, which doesn't work. We don't want 20% protection. Okay, advance. So what is going on here? If we're talking about this, this being like hitting a gnat with a fly swatter, right? As in the gnat being so tiny, it can go straight through the holes. This was also anticipated in the talk that I referenced. They said this has something to do with the well-known electrostatic properties of fabrics. So fabrics that are drier intrinsically generate more electrostatics. And you know that because when you pull off nylon clothes, in winter, they can shock you, right? Whereas other clothes which inherently absorb more water, so the cottons, for instance, they don't generate so much of an electrostatic charge. And here I just pulled up this other paper because it gives a nice visual of that. You can see the charge in kilovolts here on the side. And this is as a function of the speed and the rubbing cycle. So it's when you take this one's for a cotton fabric, you know, you rub the cotton fabric and then you measure the electrostatic charge. And you can see how that depends on different things. So you can also compare electrostatic charges from one fabric to another, and the nylons, the silks, you know, the polyesters, those are going to generate more charge, and then things probably like cotton, not so much. So then it might be that the process is more like trying to catch a tiny gnat with an electronic fly swatter. And I also, call out my daughter for this one. I did not know electronic fly swatters existed. But the image is a good one. It's, the particle or the virus, it not only has to make its way through the structure of the material, it also has to make its way through the electronics of the material. And it could well be that there is some potential there that is interfering with the virus or its ability to assemble. So that is what I learned about masks. I think a lot more is going to come out in the upcoming months. This has become a very hot topic, so papers that have been buried for years are being brought forth, and a lot of new wonderful research is joining it, and I think we're going to learn a lot more. I think that the most important thing are the test results. Those layers of fabrics look really good. It also looked really important to keep them well closed. So the mask close to the face, not letting the nose out, not being over the chin, that doesn't work. It has to cover the nose and the mouth, but also be good and tight. I saw a couple of other things which I threw in because they were a nice idea here at the end of the talk. You can put a sheet of paper inside your mask and then throw the paper away every time you use it. Coming up soon, nanoparticles that actually generate nano batteries, right? So taking this electrostatic idea a step further, this has already been used on biofilms. So they're trying to see if they can use this now also for viruses. I'm sure we'll hear more about that in the future. And a home remedy, thank you to my sister for forwarding this one. If your mask doesn't fit well, you can always put a pair of tights, a cutout from a pair of stockings, right? This is research from one Lorena Fernandez at Northeastern University. And they also did measurements on this and found that this second layer, completely encasing the mask really increases its efficiency. And once again, you could ask yourself, if this is a cotton mask with nylon on top of it, not only is the stocking closing the holes now, but you might also be getting that electrostatic effect. So the best of both worlds, it looks like. So with that, I'm going to thank you very much for having spent this time with me. There are some resources here of where you could get masks or where you could donate masks, some instructions of how to make them safe. And I'm going to stop talking now. And I really hope some of you have questions and would like to continue the conversation. So Dawn, back to you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Lorena. And I'm just going to give you a huge round of applause. This was
thank you.
wildly successful. And I'm so excited. And I'm blown away by the things that I've just learned today. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen, please. And then I'm going to invite Sonia to join us. And Sonia is going to start our Q&A. Sonia?
That is accurate. Hi, Dr. Tribe. That was so interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia.
Lots of good information. So we would encourage anybody, if you have any questions, to continue to add them to the question and answer portion in your screen. But Dr. Tribe, this question came up from one of our guests. And he was just asking if the different forms of chemical bonding in the materials act differently as barriers to the virus. And he says, thanks in advance.
And thank you so much for the question. I think definitely after what I have read these last few weeks, it's not just about size. So yes, I would guess chemical bonding has a lot to do with it. In particular, I think people are looking at how charges are distributed. And that would have a lot to do with the polarity of the molecules, whether there are ionic bonds involved, whether there are hydrogen bonds involved, and how that is affecting the electrical environment that the virus or the droplets are trying to get through.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Sonia, are there any other questions right now?
I don't have any right now, Dawn.
All right. So to our participants, you are still welcome to offer some questions through our Q&A functionality. But in the meantime, Dr. Tribe, I am very curious if you could tell us a little bit about what exactly was that moment that you started to look into this a little bit more? Was there something really specific that happened over this quarantine season for you? Or was it us saying to you, hey, do you want to do a talk on masks? What was it that got you looking
It was before that,
okay,
which is probably why I really jumped on the invitation. I think it was, you know, that sort of 1, 2, 3 of my friends' behaviors, you know. The one who has friends, you know, and family in Italy who was ahead of us in terms of, you know, suffering from the virus. Her going ahead and buying the masks and being so generous to share them with us. And then, you know, Greglin from Penn State Berks making the masks. And that's where I really started questioning, because it's like, you know, Greglin is so linked up with the American Chemical Society, and she volunteers so much for them, and she's really in the loop, you know, about what's going on. I'm like, I must have missed something, you know, I missed the memo somewhere. And I think those two really primed me. And when my friend, the physician, you know, when Dr. Riddle started posting the same thing, I was like, wait, you know, this is confirmed, you know, the masks are here for a purpose, you know, somebody's decided this is a good idea, and I don't want to be the last one that finds out about it, so I'd better start studying. And
Fantastic.
For me, it's always more reassuring when I can take things back, you know, to the atomic and the molecular level and say, okay, this is working because this happens, or there's no way this is working because that does not happen. So I feel, you know, I feel this was time well invested, because at least to me, seeing those results, you know, that somebody has produced that show that so much of the droplets, even at those very small sizes, do get retained. That makes me feel a lot better about putting on a mask and saying, when I go out, you know, should I have this thing, even though I'm being careful? Should I have this thing? If I put this mask on, I'm really protecting people. It's not just a pipe dream, you know. It's not aspirational. So if you take the trouble and endure the discomfort of wearing a mask out in public, you know you're helping people.
That's great. Awesome. So
we have several questions and or comments coming in. Somebody had asked if a recording of this talk would be available, as they have several friends who would be interested, and it will be available right on our website. So thank you for that question. The next question is, which material, if any, is best?
Okay, it seemed to me from what was in that paper, and once again, the link is there, so everybody's welcome to go and read it. It seemed to me that the combination of cotton with silk was really good. So I guess the important thing is, you know, you don't want to suffocate yourself. So you don't want to put in so many layers that you can't breathe. But you do want more than one layer, because there are other results in the paper that I didn't show, that if you only use one of those layers, the amount that's absorbed is a lot less. So a lot more gets through, and that's not good. So some combination of fabrics that lets you breathe, that fits your face well, but that filters well. And it looked like cotton with silk was doing a pretty good job.
Excellent, thank you. Another question, this is going to be kind of a variation or a riff off of that original one. What would be better to use, a handmade cloth mask or a manufactured disposable mask?
Oh my goodness, I have to do more research.
Sounds like we have a follow-up LionSide Chat.
Yeah, coming soon.
I'll get back to you on that one. Actually, you know what? My mother-in-law, who's a physician who has volunteered all over the world, she told me quite some time ago, when I showed her the first cloth mask that I had made, which is the one at the beginning of this talk. I showed it to her because it's a pretty fabric that she had given me. She said that in an emergency, you could take a kitchen paper towel and fold it, you know, to make a mask like you do with a fabric, and just staple it to a couple of ear loops and use that, and it wouldn't be half bad. And this is a lady that's done volunteer medicine all over the world. So I would say anything is better than nothing. But I would have to read more to answer if, you know, a good cloth one or a good disposable one is a better idea.
No, that's great. That while Sonia is taking a look at the other questions, one of the things that I think I'm not sure we fully thought through with this being our first chat is an opportunity to share the resources and the slides that you presented. So once we finish the chat today, I'd like to talk with you with my co-moderators about how we do that. And so for those of you that are listening that would like to take a look at that, keep checking our website. We'll probably have some updates about that in the next couple of days. Sonia, you're muted. Do you have any other questions that you want to offer?
Yes, I do. They keep pouring in. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to keep up
that's
here.
Okay.
So if, and one of our questions is, how do I explain this to friends in simple terms in about 3 sentences when they ask, what kind of mask should I have?
A cloth mask that has more than one layer of fabric that you can wash and dry.
Excellent. Okay, another question coming in is, can you talk through your research process a bit? There's a lot of information out there, and the way that you approach sorting through it all would be helpful for others hoping to do similar investigations.
Well, that's, yes. Let me say this. What I just presented was not a research talk. If students in my group had done this, I might have slapped them on the wrist. This was a very fast gathering of information, okay? So basically what I did was listen to the talk that caught my attention, and then try to answer my own questions, which I admit were informed by, you know, what I have studied in the past about structure and dynamics of interactions at surfaces. That's what I do for research. So that informed me as to what kind of search, what kind of keywords to put into searches. And then when I found things that seemed credible to me in terms of where they were published, I kind of strang them together to form a narrative which I could understand. I'm not sure I can put that easily into terms that anybody else could do, because it was driven by my own understanding of how things work. But if other people are curious, what I would do is say, start with reasonable government units and professional associations. So the Food and Drug Administration, the American Chemical Society, you know, the places that might have information that would have been vetted by other people. Sometimes I go out and look for things on YouTube or on the internet, but it's because I have some criteria in mind already that's going to allow me to filter. If you just go there, for starters, there's a lot of weird stuff that hasn't been discussed by anybody. So it might be people's ideas, you know. But if you go to websites for different institutions, typically the information they're putting forth is more credible. Or it's been discussed by more people. And then ultimately, if you have the time and ability of doing a real literature search and, you know, going through databases, that's probably the best way to do it. That's not entirely what I did today. I had to grab things a little bit faster than I would have liked to. So I would not hold this talk up as a model of, you know, great research.
Gotcha. Thank you, Dr. Tribe. We have another question here. Can you explain why experts are saying that a mask doesn't necessarily protect the person wearing it versus protecting others nearby?
Okay, I'm very, very cautious about answering this question because I would dislike it intensely if I made somebody think they are more protected than they really are. So the research that we just looked at, it's preliminary to start with. It's done in a lab rather than with live people, but it doesn't say anything about the virus going in one direction and not in another one. So one could extrapolate, you know, that the mask is protecting the person as well as everybody around them. Nevertheless, I haven't seen any reputable board of, you know, physicians endorse that. So I would say make up your own mind. For me, having seen everything that I've read up to now, I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable wearing a mask than not wearing one for myself, as well as for the people that are around me that I can protect. But I think, you know, some of the problems are that, you know, probably the masks don't fit so well. So you think you're protected, but if air is going in around the openings, then you're not all that protected. Whereas the air that you're sending out, it's going out in a more directed way. So it's probably granting more protection in that sense. And there's always the topic, you know, if air contaminated with virus got on your mask, and then you take it off and you put it somewhere and you go and rub your eyes, you know, or something like that, then you're getting all that virus back again. So I think those are some of the reasons that one should be very wary about saying, you know, the mask is going to protect you, because there are all these additional things. I would really like to see over the next few weeks, the next few months, as more research comes out and this gets more studied and more attention, I would like to see if we're going to see any change in how things are addressed by health organizations.
Excellent. There's one question, and I think this will be a potential good question to wrap up our session on. But you could prove me wrong, people. With the variety of materials people use and the variety of facial covering, some both nose and mouth, others just mouth, would it be better to have a standard mask for all? With the current variety, is it really effective?
That's really interesting. I did not know that anybody recommended a mask that does not cover the nose. And I find that one really surprising. But I think it would be really nice if I could go to, you know, the pharmacy and go to a shelf and pick off the good mask, you know, the one that's going to keep me safe and keep everybody around me safe during these times. In fact, you know, not even these times. I mean, why are we letting ourselves get the flu all the time, you know, when we just could be masking up and doing a much better job?
Sure, and our guest did comment. It's just the way that people have the mask on, but they don't wear it over their nose.
I see. Yeah, it's not magic. Chemistry is chemistry, and it's not magic. It would be lovely if the mask were a talisman, you know, and we could carry around the mask in our hand and say, I'm protected because I have the mask, you know, I'm protected by the power of the mask, and so are you. But it doesn't work that way. The virus is in these little drops, in the droplets. The droplets come out through the mouth and come out through the nose, or go in through the nose and go in through the mouth. So if it's not completely covered, it doesn't work.
Very, very interesting. Sonia, is that out then?
That's it. We got a lot of thank yous, and some participants are sharing that they learned a lot from your presentation today. I sure did. So
did I. Well, Dr. Tribe, I thank you for being our first presenter for the LionSide Chat. and bringing up a lot of food for thought and an interesting way for us to look at things, maybe in ways that we haven't in the past. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Yes, thank you. I thank everyone for joining us this evening and taking some time out of your night and whatever it is that you do in the evenings in your little neck of the woods. And I encourage you to take a look at our upcoming LionSide Chats 1 week from today. I believe at 4 o'clock we'll be learning about It's a Small World After All, the life of a virus. So without any further ado, thank you for joining us for our LionSide Chat today. Please click on the link when you leave the webinar and provide a few comments to us through the brief survey that we've provided for you that will help us to drive our process moving forward. Let us know anything that you have thought about. You can contact us through our website here or through our email address, and we look forward to seeing you again at future LionSide Chats. So without any further ado, signing off until next time, this has been Penn State Berks LionSide Chats. Thank you and good night.
Good night.